What's your sign? This week we're going to be talking about Aquarius. Everything you ever wanted to know about having an Aquarius Sun, Aquarius Moon, or Aquarius Rising, which is also called the Ascendant, and just general Aquarius information. We'll start with the basics. This little guy is a symbol for Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by the planet Uranus. And there's a lot of things about the physical characteristics of the planet, its discovery, and its name that gives us little hints about the attributes that come into play when we talk about Aquarius. So we're going to first look at exploring the planet and its attributes, and then we're going to tie those in to how they relate to an Aquarian experience of life. So we're going to start with its name. I call it Uranus. There's lots of people who call it Uranus, who call it Uranus, who call it Uranus. So there's at least 4 different ways that are common pronunciation for the name of the planet. And what I find really interesting is that everybody's always telling everybody else what the right pronunciation is. So, in researching for this video, I probably visited maybe like 10 or 12 websites, all looking at information about this planet. And for most of those websites, the first paragraph of information is on how to pronounce the name of the planet. And the interesting thing is that each website has a different idea of what the correct pronunciation is, and part of that of course relates to dialect and accent and where you're from and where the author of the website is written. But I think it's interesting that we have all these different ways of just communicating about what the name of this planet is. It's sort of marching to the beat of its own drum and making us look at what we think we know and reinterpret it and see things through new lenses. And that's one of the experiences of Aquarius that we'll talk about throughout the course of this video. Then we're going to look at its physical characteristics. So it has 27 moons. It's the coldest planet in the solar system. It's considered an ice giant. It has an 84-year orbit around the sun, which is obviously much, much longer than Earth's orbit and most other inner planets. It has some other really interesting attributes. For example, it rotates in the opposite direction that Earth does. And that's interesting because only one other planet rotates in the opposite direction of Earth, and that's Venus. But it just makes it a little bit quirky and different. And again, sort of that energy of doing things a different way. And that's coupled by the fact that it has an unusual tilt. It has a different tilt than every other planet in the solar system, or at the very least every other planet that we've currently discovered in the solar system. And so basically what it is that the tilt of Uranus makes it so that while other planets kind of look like they're spinning tops, Uranus looks more like a rolling ball, like it's rolling on its side through space. So it's a different way of doing things. It's opening yourself up to, trying things in a new way, bulking at conventional wisdom, marching to the beat of your own drum, and just taking a really different approach to the same issues, reinventing things in a new way. All of that kind of stuff is going to be are going to be really important attributes as we move through this video and talk about Aquarius. It was discovered in 1787, but I kind of use the word discovered loosely because it's not like it wasn't something that was known by the ancient astrologers. It's just that they didn't know it was a planet. There's mention of it back far into the 1600s where they talked about it as a comet or perhaps a far-off star, but it was something that was seen in the sky, but no one knew exactly what it was or exactly where it fit. And then when it was discovered in 1787, of course, it changed how astrologers and astronomers looked at the night sky, right? It changed the rulership. It was the first planet that breaks us out of the traditional rulership of the zodiac. So, for example, originally Aquarius would have been seen as ruled by the planet Saturn. There are some people who might say that there's some attributes that make that a reasonable rulership. I'm not one of those astrologers. I believe very strongly that Aquarius has a sole rulership of Uranus. But there are astrologers, of course, that would look at dual rulerships. But it was one of the first, the first example of the bridge that divided ancient astrologers from modern astrologers, and it changed the way that we saw the solar system. And that change came through technology. It came through no longer having to use the human eye to be able to detect objects in space, right? So technology and science allowed us to open ourselves to seeing things that the human eye aren't capable of seeing, and technology and innovation and science and all those kinds of things have a relationship with the sign of Aquarius, as we'll talk about throughout the course of this video. And we'll end just by saying that Aquarius rules the 11th house of the zodiac. The 11th house is the house of goals and aspirations. It's the 11th house is it's about the future. It's about who we want to become. It's about what we're working towards. It's about how we want to contribute. It's about the legacy that we want to leave, It's a house that's not typically activated until later in life. I'm a big fan of Stephen Forrest, and he talks about how the 11th house isn't activated until after the second Saturn return, which is 59 years old or older. So it's the house of the future. It's the house that you come into once you've absorbed all the wisdom of your youth and your young adulthood and even your sort of medium adulthood. It's the house that you come into when you've amassed massive amounts of knowledge and you have a new way of seeing the world that you live in, and a new way of interpreting who you want to be in your life. And you think about it, there's a lot of people who have this house activated. We call them sort of midlife crisis that bring them into the 11th house, that pull them out of that sort of 10th house conventional wisdom and conventional work and career and status, and into the 11th house, which is a brand new world and a brand new sense of self that comes from new experiences and new interpretations of the world that we live in. We look at the mythology. So it's really interesting because most people, if you ask about Aquarius, they'll tell you it's the water bearer. And I would say that the more apt description would be like the water thrower. And I'll explain that in a minute. So basically there was a young boy who was considered very handsome. He was about 15 years old, and his name was Ganymede, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. And he was kidnapped by the god Zeus. And he was kidnapped to be his lover and his slave. And back then, it wasn't uncommon for powerful men to take young men as lovers. But in this case, of course, Zeus was a god who was taking a mortal as a lover, right? And so Zeus didn't really act on social conventions. Usually an older man would take a young man as a lover, and what would end up happening is that he'd sort of mentor him and help him and support him, and it would be sort of a loving, if unequal, relationship. But in the case of Zeus, he was a god, so he really didn't need to do any of that. He didn't need to help Ganymede. He didn't need to protect him. He just basically used him. So he pulled him into the heavens, I suppose, and just used him and turned him into his water bearer. So basically it was kind of like a drink carrier, where like Ganymede had to get him wine and water, ambrosia, or whatever he wanted, and just was treated like a servant, was I think dehumanized in some ways. And Zeus paid Ganymede's father horses as payment for his son, but the father really didn't have any choice. It was sort of like a platitude, or it wasn't real. The father couldn't say no to Zeus anyway, but he accepted the gift. I think the gift itself is quite interesting because horses in most cultures represent freedom, right? So he sold his son for freedom, and I think that's an interesting part of the story, or an interesting part of the symbolism in the story. Anyway, so Ganymede, he gets to this point where he's done this for a really long time. He's just a servant. He's sort of trotted on, and he's not treated, very, very kindly or given any freedom. And eventually he gets to a point where he just says, like, F this, I'm not dealing with this stuff anymore. And he pours out all of the water and the wine and ambrosia in the heavens, and refuses to serve anymore. He refuses to submit. And he says, basically to Zeus, like, I'm having none of this anymore. And the pouring out all of this liquid in the heavens leads to floods that flood the entire planet of Earth. And so there's a lot of suffering as a result of the floods from this rebellion. And basically, Zeus takes a stance that you really wouldn't expect him to take. Zeus, instead of fighting back or killing everyone that Ganymede knows or hurting him in any way or whatever, he turns him into an immortal and puts him in the sky as a constellation. And I think first of all, it's really this very interesting story. It's this interesting story because it's about someone who was treated like they didn't matter, was sort of trotted upon, was suppressed, and turned into an object who was serving someone else with no consideration for his well-being. And that person, through nothing but inner fire and inner strength, and I guess inner confidence and a sense of rebellion, stands up and says, I refuse to live this life anymore, and I refuse to let you oppress me. And I think a lot of the qualities of this myth, they really nicely encapsulate this sort of Aquarius archetype, which is very much about that sort of sense of inner wisdom, that sense of independence, of lack of willingness to submit to someone else, this wanting to carve your own path in life, this refusal to follow in someone else's footsteps, this refusal to do something just because someone else told you it's what you should do or what you have to do. And I think, this fighting against oppression and this fighting against the violence of Zeus and this fighting against, this cultural norm that had put Ganymede in a position where he was treated like, inhumanly. All of that stuff we're going to talk about throughout the course of this video. All of that has a relationship with Aquarius, that refusal to accept cultural norms, that independence, that inner fire, that thirst, that incredible thirst for freedom and autonomy, and finally that dissidence and that rebellion when someone tried to put him in a box and tell him what to do, right? So we'll talk about all those throughout the course of this video, but I do think it's really interesting that we call him the water bearer, because the myth is nothing to do with the fact that he was the water bearer. It's really about the fact that he threw that water out. And so it's interesting, I guess, maybe even culturally, why we choose to focus on the part of the myth that's the least relevant to the attributes of the sign that it represents. So every astrological sign has an elemental association. And Aquarius is associated with the element of air. And elemental associations are kind of important. They tell us about how we move through the world, what our experience of life is, what we prioritize, and also they tell us a lot about relationships, so compatibility and what's the easiest for us, what's the most difficult for us, what areas we have to learn in. A lot of those things we can figure out by looking at the elemental association that signs have. And so Aquarius is associated with air, and air is an energy of thought. It's an energy of the mind, of mental processes, of research, of learning, of understanding. It's less about the experiences of life and more about our interpretation of those experiences, it's about our interpretation of those experiences, and I guess in some way it's about what we gain from those experiences, what we learn from those experiences. It's an energy of thought, philosophy, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and in some ways also creation, right? Because everything that was ever born on the world started as a thought, right? Every creative project starts as someone's idea. Even most of the time, when we choose to have children, they start as an idea, and then they end up being created through the physical expression of two bodies, and finally of one body giving birth to the child. But it starts in the mind and it ends up in reality. And so air is the beginning of the process. Air is when something hasn't been created yet, and you're trying to figure out how to make it happen and how to make it work and how to bring it into the world. But like I said, it's also how you make sense of what's already in the world and how you make sense of your own experiences. But the energy of Aquarius in particular, as you'll find out throughout the course of this video, it's about air in a more futuristic sense. So it's air as in the thoughts that turn into creations. It's air as in the thoughts that turn into scientific discoveries, the theories that become that turn into facts after research. It's the beginning of something that hasn't been created yet. But all of that is the energy of air. And so we look at the other signs that have the elemental association of air, and we find Libra. Of course, Aquarius is right in the middle there, and Gemini. So when we look at compatibility, whenever you have signs that share an elemental association, there's an ease of interaction. It's like people speaking the same language, having some similar goals, or at the very least being able to understand the goals that the other people have, right? So when we look at elemental associations, we can find what signs have the easiest relationships with other signs. So in this case, there's some ease in interaction between Libra and Aquarius and Gemini. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not any conflict in those interactions. It doesn't mean that you can't have incredible connections and relationships that don't share elemental associations with you. Of course you can. It just means that there's a little bit more of ease of interaction. And the other thing I always want to be very, very careful with is that you're not your sun sign. So just because you're an Aquarius sun and you go out and you find someone who is a Libra sun, it certainly doesn't mean that you're going to get along. You could have 1,000 things in your chart that are disagreeing with each other. You could have a ton of other things in your chart that are more important and more dominant than your Aquarius sun. So, you don't want to look at someone's sun sign to determine compatibility. But if, let's say, you had someone who had like 5 planets in Aquarius, and their sun was in the 11th house, which is ruled by Aquarius, and you have someone else who's got 5 planets in Libra, and their sun is in the 7th house, which is ruled by Libra, then you might find some ease of communication and ease of compatibility, because those are the most dominant energies in those two people's charts. So we'll start with the Aquarius sun. So the sun in astrology is who you are in stillness when no one is around and nothing is affecting you. So I like to think of it kind of like as your set point, or your authentic self, or just like the part of yourself that's acting rather than reacting. But because it's really only the part of yourself that comes into play when nothing is affecting you and no one's around you, it's also your innermost self, the self that you spend the most time with, and consequently it's usually how you identify yourself. So if you have an Aquarius sun, then you might see the Aquarius inside of yourself, but that doesn't mean that everyone else will. So throughout the course of this video, if you're an Aquarius sun, what you want to do is look at I guess in some ways your soul's evolution, like what ways are you running this beautiful Aquarius energy in, a light, loving, helpful way, and what ways are you running it from a place of hurt or anger or anxiety or shame. So you want to look at the parts of your soul that are in need of a little TLC, and how you are going to evolve in this life, and some of the big work of this life for you. We look at Aquarius Moon. The moon in astrology is the emotional body, so it's what we feel, how we feel, what makes us feel, and how we demonstrate those feelings to other people. So in the case of Aquarius Moon, what you want to look at throughout the course of this video is how these things come up in you when you're having an emotional experience, what it looks like when you feel unsafe, what it looks like when you feel like you're not heard, or you're not accepted, or you're not valued, or what it looks like when you feel scared or angry or afraid, right? And then what we want to do is look at how we can turn some of those those more challenging expressions of Aquarius energy that come from a place of woundedness or come from a place of hurt into just lighter, more sort of high vibrational Aquarius energy that's really clean and pure, and that's helping the world and that's healing yourself, right? So it's a look of how to shift energies that are not running in the way that they could be. And I think in a lot of ways for all of these, for Aquarius Moon, Aquarius Sun, and Aquarius Rising, which we'll talk about in a minute, what you want to look at as well is your potential, right? Like what you're capable of being. you know, what your soul wants you to grow into in this lifetime. And so in the case of Aquarius Moon, we look at what your emotional body is capable of growing into and how it can be expressed in the cleanest, most beautiful, self-honoring way. We look at Aquarius ascendant or rising sign. They're the same. So the rising and the ascendant are two words that mean the same thing. And the rising sign is the lens through which the world sees you, your personality, how other people perceive your behavior and actions. And the rising sign also, so the rising sign is the sign that was on the eastern horizon at the time of your birth. And what it represents in astrology as well is the things that you're most likely to draw into your experience or to draw into your life. Because what you are, you become. Or sorry, what you are, you draw to yourself, right? So these are the types of experiences, types of people, types of circumstances that you're most likely to draw to yourself, because this energy is the first energy that the world meets when they find you or when they meet you. But it's also personality, of course, and how the world sees you. And one of the things I think is really important when we're talking about rising sign or ascendant is that the rising sign or the ascendant, it may be how the world sees you, but it is often not how you see yourself. So, quite often you see yourself as your sun sign. Sometimes you even see yourself as your moon sign, but it's less likely that your self-perception extends to your rising sign. That's how other people see you, not necessarily how you see yourself. And so part of looking at rising sign attributes is to make peace with how other people see you, how other people perceive your behavior and your actions, and come into a space where, again, you're running this energy in a very clean way by behaving in a way that's really self-honoring and kind to other people and loving, and just running this energy in the cleanest way possible. And the beauty of the ascendant is that if you run the energy on the ascendant in the cleanest way that you possibly can, then you are much more likely to draw positive, healthy, loving experiences towards yourself. So it becomes a really important tool for personal growth, because healing the energy of the sign on the ascendant is the quickest way to have new experiences drawn into your life that are more self-honoring, and it's the quickest way to change your life. It draws better opportunities if you clean the energy of the sign on the ascendant. And so in this case, you want to look at how you can run this energy in a really healthy, loving way, and what it looks like when you're not running this energy in a really healthy, loving way. And so we'll start with dare to be different. I think, I think that's one of the most important attributes of Aquarius, is this willingness to march to your own, march to the beat of your own drum and stand out and be different and all that kind of stuff, right? And basically, I just chose 3 pictures that demonstrate the exact same thing, but are adorable. So it's this idea, Aquarius energy is about being surrounded by people that aren't like you. So it's about just constantly surrounding yourself by with people who are nothing like you, and not changing yourself or adapting your behavior to become like them, right? So it's this energy of just total self-love and total self-acceptance, and just marching to the beat of your own drum and not needing anyone else's approval. And this can be really difficult, because Aquarius energy is this willingness to be different without this need to convert anyone else to your style of difference. So Aquarius energy is not about being quirky and unique and different and making everyone else quirky and unique and different just like you. It's not about gaining followers. It's not about gaining acclaim. It's not about leadership. It's not about standing, up and having the world bow at your feet. It's not about any of those things. It's about this willingness to be unique and different and an individual, and not need anyone else to follow in your footsteps, and not need anyone else to tell you you're okay. So that's a really hard energy to run, and we'll talk about it throughout the course of this video. But throughout history, standing out and being different has made you very vulnerable, right? The more different that you are, the higher the chances of persecution, of exile, of danger, of just not being protected during famine and war and all sorts of things like that. And so we have this sort of really visceral instinctual need to fit in. We have this visceral instinctual need to find our tribe, to find people who appreciate us and like us and think we're wonderful and all this kind of thing. And that's not vanity, it's safety. It's seeking out environments where we're protected from the world around us. And throughout history, we've found that safety is, closely aligned with belonging and community and family and all that kind of thing, right? And so, what Aquarius asks of us, this really beautiful energy asks of us, is to believe that we can be different, that we can be unique, that we can be special, that we can stand out, and that we can still be loved and still be safe, and that we don't need everybody else to be just like us in order for us to be okay. And it's a really important lesson of Aquarius. It's not always an easy lesson, but the highest expression of Aquarius energy is just total self-love and self-acceptance, and coming into a space where you don't need anyone else to clap when you dance to your own beat, right? And so the first one's kind of internal, our relationships with ourselves, how we express ourselves in the world, how we make sense of our difference, all of that kind of stuff. And then we move on to the more external expression of Aquarius energy, which is challenging societal norms. And I picked these pictures really, I guess, quite specifically or thoughtfully or something like that, because I think they're all different ways that we express the changing societal norms, right? So the woman in the middle is probably my favorite pick. I just really like that she's an older lady, she's a senior, and she just sort of refuses to to fit into the stereotype of what we think aging is, or fit into the stereotype of what we think older people should look like or older people should be. I think, some of the coolest Aquarian energy on the planet is like the red hat, purple scarf ladies who sort of walk around and are, these like cool looking, funky political activists that are, older adults. And this woman in the middle, I think, represents something really beautiful about Aquarius energy, which is it looks like she's just wearing some bright, shiny, happy colors, but on some level she's saying I want to stand out, I want to be different, I want to wear what makes sense to me, I want to feel beautiful, and I want to come out against this idea that I'm supposed to fit in a particular box because of my age or my gender or my socioeconomic class, a status, or anything else, right? So she's basically sort of standing out and saying, I'm going to be exactly who I am, and I don't need you to tell me who I'm supposed to be or what I'm supposed to wear or what I'm supposed to think and all that kind of thing. And so that's a really important part of Aquarius energy, that refusal to fit in a box, that refusal to be stapled into a category or classified, and that sort of unwillingness to fit into what someone else tells you you're supposed to be. The person on the left-hand side is a genderqueer individual who doesn't associate as either male or female. And that, again, is just another example of challenging societal norms. So it's a newer example. There's, it's really the movement to accept gender fluid identities and the movement to accept non-binary identities is relatively new, and so this individual is expressing themselves fully and refusing to be stapled into a category in terms of their gender or how other people perceived their gender identity in relation to their sex or their biology. So it's another way that Aquarius energy is coming in. What I think is interesting is that this part around gender fluid identities, it's a newer generation of Aquarius energy that's coming through, and you're seeing it more and more frequently because it's just a new social norm that's starting to be questioned and challenged and tested and broken. And so it's definitely Aquarius energy that's coming through, but even someone who is older and is running Aquarius energy might not be accessing it because it's so it's fresher. But it's an interesting energy that's coming in, and really it's about, again, challenging societal gender norms, what we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to act and how we're supposed to show up in this world. And I don't say that implying that there aren't gender fluid people that are in their 80s. Of course there are gender fluid people in their 80s. It's just that it hasn't gained visibility until much more recently. And then on the right hand side, we have on the bottom picture, it's a child who is wearing a tutu and playing basketball, which again is like about challenging gender stereotypes that you're supposed to participate in certain activities based on your sex or gender or sexual orientation. And, there's lots of ways I could demonstrate that. I've seen lots of kids who, are playing with like dolls and cars at the same time. So again, that's challenging gender norms. And then at top, I'm the rainbow sheep of the family. I just like it. And I think, again, that's around sex and sexual orientation. And I recognize that a lot of the examples that I've used are around gender, sex, sexual orientation, and aging, and that there are so many different ways that you can challenge societal norms. There's lots of ways of challenging societal norms in terms of corporatism and materialism. I have a lot of Aquarius friends who refuse to buy, products that are new and will only shop in thrift stores or do, clothing swaps or things like that, because they're using that sort of Aquarius energy to confront this idea that our society has, that new is automatically better than old and all sorts of things like that. So there's 1,000 different expressions of this energy. These are just the ones that I happen to choose, but I'm in full recognition that there are 1,000 ways that you can challenge cultural norms. I just couldn't encapsulate them all on a single slide. And this is a huge part of Aquarius energy. It sort of comes in and says, I get that things have been like that for 100 years, but why? Who is it serving? Is it helping anyone? Is it holding us back? Is it propelling us forward? Is there a purpose for it? And there are some societal norms that hold, purpose, that are important, right? And I'm not implying that there aren't. There's kindness, love on, speak to other people how you want to be spoken to. There's societal norms in terms of, you don't walk into a store and bypass the entire line and go to the cashier and ignore everybody else. So there's societal norms that work, and there's societal norms that don't work. But what Aquarius energy does is question and challenge all of them, so we can figure out why all of them exist and who they're serving and what we could be doing better. So it's not necessarily about introducing new energy as much as it is challenging old energy and old convention and seeing if it can be repurposed to support people and help people in better ways. Aquarius and time. So I've talked about this throughout the video series. Different astrological signs have different relationships with time. Capricorn has a relationship to history in the past. Aries has a relationship with time in terms of like that it likes things to move as quickly as possible. Taurus has a relationship with time as in it's the sign that represents the present moment. Aquarius represents the future. So Aquarius' relationship with time is this energy of living in the future, of being on the cutting edge of whatever exists right now. And so in some ways an Aquarius existence is about having one foot in the present moment and having one foot in the future, in what's going to be and what's going to come to pass. And so Aquarius in many ways is, people with strong Aquarius energy, they bring sort of small sort of microcosms of the energy of the future into the world so that the rest of us can get ready for it when it comes in. And so Aquarius rules anything that's on the cutting edge of technology, on the cutting edge of changing, cultural norms or cultural status, changing politics, changing spirituality, anything that the world is about to become. Aquarius stands on the very edge of it and is the first person to step into the future, to step into what could be. They're the innovators of the zodiac. They're, like I said, they're on the cutting edge of the new world, of what we're all going to become. And part of the role of Aquarius is to bring the energy that's going to be into the present moment so that the rest of us can get ready for it. And I use these pictures pretty, again, very specifically. The top three images are what Aquarius energy is now. So relationship with time. So, the middle one, you have the sort of the flying car, right? Which is like, it may or may never happen, but whether it does happen or it doesn't happen, the person who's trying to design it right now, I promise you, has a ton of Aquarius energy in them. It's an energy of innovation, invention, and bringing new things into the world, or repurposing old energy so it can be utilized in a more effective and efficient way. And so Aquarius would rule, any profession that's working in really high-tech fields, or innovative fields. So the people who would be looking at seeing if it's possible to create hover cars or flying cars, the people who are looking at robotics, or looking at, how technology can be used in order to make a difference in our day-to-day lives. That would be very heavy Aquarius energy. The other picture on the left-hand side is a guy who looks like he's using a new form of glasses, or a visor, or a new way that we're going to use computers, and that would also be Aquarius energy. Aquarius energy is on the cutting edge of what is, and it's basically having a foot into what's about to become. And so all of those energies are related to Aquarius. And then I put the pictures on the bottom really specifically too, because there are things that used to be Aquarius energy that are no longer Aquarius energy. The picture on the left-hand side is a replicator, which was used in Star Trek. Replicators have now become 3D printers, with various applications in medical technology, and in food preparation, and also just in manufacturing and production. So replicators, 50 years ago were Aquarius. They were, that would be the sort of energy that Aquarius brings into the world, would be the energy of replicators, because they hadn't been created yet, or there were prototypes, or, it wasn't something that we accessed on a day-to-day basis. So replicators, while they still are in the realm of Aquarius, in 10 years they won't be, because as soon as they're absorbed by, accepted by the entire population, as soon as it becomes a part of our day-to-day lives, as soon as it becomes something that we don't think is weird or strange or different or cutting edge, then it stops being Aquarius. So it has about a 10-year shelf life where it will be something that's related to the energy of Aquarius, but after that it will no longer be in the realm of Aquarius, because Aquarius only holds on to things that haven't been fully accepted by the rest of the world yet. It only holds on to things that haven't been integrated into our society in such a way as to change the way that we live our day-to-day lives. And so I use the picture on the bottom right-hand side also to express a similar energy. In Star Trek, which would have been like the early 90s, I guess, Star Trek generation, that's Captain Picard, and he had all these pads, right, called pads, PADD, which is the equivalent of a modern day iPad, right? But back, when that was created, that would have been, cutting edge Aquarius kind of energy, that, talking about something that no one else had even thought of or heard of or imagined, and all of a sudden it becomes a possibility or a reality through creativity and fiction, right? And so, in the 90s, like an iPad was like a full on Aquarius energy. Well, I'm going to say probably like even now, iPad is no longer an Aquarius energy, because it's something that's, that we use in our day-to-day lives. It's something that that everyone knows about, that it's not something that people go, wow, oh my God, I've never heard of that before, right? And so Aquarius energy is that energy of, wow, I've never heard of that before. What does it do, and how does it work? And it's no longer futuristic technology, and so it's therefore no longer Aquarius kind of energy. And the middle one, of course, is that, if you look at it, 100 years ago, airplanes, of course, would have been Aquarius technology. And in some books, you will still see airplanes as Aquarius technology, Aquarius type energy, and that's inaccurate. They no longer fall under Aquarius, because the reason that they fell under Aquarius in the first place was because it was something that no one had access to. Very few people had ever seen them. It seemed like this crazy, wild idea that you would get into this, long metal tube and fly like a bird, right? And so back in the day, airplanes were the realm of Aquarius, and now they are no longer the realm of Aquarius. So I think what's interesting about Aquarius energy is that it's less about the actual activity or the product, and more about the world's response to that activity or product. Aquarius is only, basically, Aquarius rules anything that hasn't been absorbed and integrated into the world yet. It absorbs anything that's new and fresh and holds a new perspective or a new energy in the world. And as soon as that perspective and that energy is integrated into the world, it no longer is Aquarius, because Aquarius is about the energy that it brings and the way that people respond to it more than the actual product or behavior or style. This is a picture of Tesla, who's super cool. And I wanted to just read the slide, which just says, throw out everything you thought you knew. I think that's what Aquarius is. Aquarius, Aries is this energy of like fresh and new and bringing, new life into the world. Aquarius doesn't have to be fresh. It doesn't have to be new. What it does have to be is different. So basically, if you have a different application for a technology that's been used for 100 years, but all of a sudden you found a brand new way to use it that no one has ever found before, that's Aquarius energy. It's this energy of repurposing. It's this energy of reusing. It can be this energy to picking up things in the past and finding a new way to interpret them, finding a new way to use them or change them or shift them. And so Aquarius energy is about throwing out everything you thought you knew about yourself, throwing out everything you thought you knew about the world, and seeing if you can detach yourself and break free from these constructs that we've all been shopped into. So, break free of the ideas that we've been indoctrinated with, break free of what we think that society has to be, or what we think we have to be, or what the world has to be, or all of those kinds of things. And there's always this sort of like shock factor in the areas of Aquarius as a result, because it really is about throwing out this idea of what things are supposed to be and opening yourself up to what they could be or what they currently are. And it's a sort of cutting edge energy, like I talked about earlier, being on the brink of something that's going to change the whole world before anybody else knows about it. That's Aquarius energy. And it has this energy of genius associated with it. Aquarius, it's an air sign. It's associated with the mind. But like I said, it's associated with this like brilliant, unique, interesting mind that sees things in a way that no one else sees them, and builds things in a way that no one else builds them. And so it has an association with invention and genius as well. So, for example, someone like who's like a really serious inventor, you would have definitely have a very strong Uranus in their chart, and you'd have a very strong Aquarius in their chart, because it's bringing something into the world that's going to change the world. And part of what Aquarius is about is change, but it's change that's usually generated through the brilliance and the wisdom of the mind, and the mind's willingness and ability to reinterpret old data in new ways, or look at the world in a different way, or see something that isn't working and realize that it isn't working even though no one else realizes it isn't working. So it's creating a new reality, and it's creating a new reality through technology, through invention, through new ideas, and in a bit we'll talk about it as well, through humanitarianism. But it's creating a new reality through choosing to see the world differently, and choosing to be different in the world, and choosing to believe that something else is possible. And I think Tesla's a really classic example of Aquarian energy in a lot of ways, because Tesla was this inventor who invented like a crazy amount of products, just like crazy amounts of technology that completely changed the world. But he wasn't necessarily grounded in reality while he was creating it. So he created all of these amazing technologies which ended up changing the world. But at the same time, he didn't patent them necessarily. He didn't take money for them. His inventions got stolen. He didn't take care of himself in the physical reality of today, because his mind was so far in the future that he forgot to live in the present. And we're going to talk about that in a bit, but that's part of what we have to look at as Aquarius, as people with strong Aquarius energy, is that we sort of get trapped in what could be and what will be, and sort of distance ourselves from what is, and from our physical bodies, and from our physical experience of life, and from mindfulness and presence. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But this energy, this brilliance of Tesla, is a classic example of Aquarius energy. Someone who could see the world in a way that no one else could see it, and could see potentials that no one else could see. That is very Aquarius energy. Social and political activism. So I have the middle picture, which is Banksy, keep your coins, I want change. I really like that picture. And then the top one, question everything, which is, I feel like that should be like the slogan for Aquarius. Aquarius is about challenging the status quo, but it's also about questioning why things are done the way that they're done. And I think in a lot of ways, every sign is a response to the sign before it. And, the sign before it is Capricorn, and Capricorn energy is this energy of like accepting the wisdom of the past and learning from the past and getting grounded in the past and bringing that into the present. And Aquarius wants to take a stand and say, okay, Cap, you got some good points there, but why do things exist like that in the first place? You can't automatically do something the same way just because it's always been done that way. Look at the harm that can cause, and look at the hurt that can cause, and look at the idea that, just because we do something in a particular way doesn't mean that it's the right way to do things. And I have this sort of really good story, which is, I think, Tim Robbins' story. He talks about how Anthony Robbins, one of the two. He talks about how, he comes home one day and he finds his wife is cooking a pot roast, right? And she cuts off both ends of the pot roast and she puts it in this nice big pan. And he looks at her and goes, why do you do that? Why would you cut off the ends? And she goes, oh, well, you're just supposed to do that. You cut off the ends. So he goes and he talks to his mother, and his mother, says, yeah, you cut off the ends. That's how you cook pot roast. And then he goes, this doesn't make any sense. Why are they wasting all this good meat? And finally he goes to the grandmother and he goes, do you cut off the ends of a pot roast? And she goes, yes, of course I do. And he goes, why? And he goes, I have a really small pan. So basically, 3 generations of women from this family have been wasting, meat for probably like 50 years because grandma had a small pan and had to. And the other 2, even though they had pans big enough that they never had to cut off the ends, end up cutting off the ends because that's what they've been taught to do, and they take it as gospel. And, Aquarius is the energy that counters that and starts asking questions about why we do what we do, and if it's serving us, and if it's helping us, and if we're growing from it, and if there isn't probably a better way to be, or a better way to live, or a better way to grow a society or a culture in order to support just more people and help more people. And so the slogan is really question everything. And then, at the bottom, of course, another world is possible, which is another adage of Aquarius, this energy, this willingness to believe that, just because things are the way that they are doesn't mean they couldn't be a different way, and doesn't mean they shouldn't be a different way. And not holding on to the past just because it's the past, and not holding on to stability just because it's stability, but coming into a space in your life where you are willing to allow change to happen when change is the right decision, and where you're willing to make peace with shocks and surprises and upheaval and change and all of that stuff, so that you can come into a place where your life is better as a result. Sometimes it takes a storm for the landscape to change, and Aquarius teaches us how to weather that storm. Humanitarianism and inequity. Aquarius has a relationship with humanitarianism, with helping and supporting other people. I've always found this really interesting about Aquarius because it's one of the first things you hear about Aquarius is that Aquarius are humanitarians. And so I've always thought, why are Aquarius humanitarians? I mean, I sort of understand it for someone who's a Cancer, who has, this sort of emotional heart, who's, crying and having difficulty accepting, that other people are struggling, and having this emotional attachment and connection to the people who are struggling. And I've always sort of thought, where does it come from in Aquarius? There isn't necessarily that same emotional connection. Aquarius are, I'm not saying that, Aquarius don't have a big heart, but their decisions usually are quite rational, quite logical, quite, using the mind to think things through and understand things. And it's less about this emotional attachment to a particular reality or to a particular outcome. And so I've often asked myself, how is there a link, such a very powerful and strong link between Aquarius and humanitarianism? And I could be wrong. I feel free to post underneath this video and argue with me, because I'd love to hear any other perspectives. But what I've come up with is that one of the biggest reasons, I think there's 2 really, really big reasons that Aquarius has a relationship with humanitarianism. One, I think Aquarius is smart enough to know that we're all better when we're all taken care of. So it's this, Aquarius has a very individualistic tendency, this ability to live, with total autonomy, this ability to take care of themselves, to be free, to be independent. And I think part of that, that sort of energy is coming into a space where you want to give everybody else that same freedom. So it's altruistic and it's beautiful and it's kind and it's loving, but part of it is coming into a space where you realize that everybody has value, because you're outside of this idea of a hierarchy. You're outside of this idea that one person is better than another person, or that one person should rule or lead another person, or that one person, doesn't have as much value. So it's sort of this egalitarian system, because Aquarius recognizes the beauty in the individual and the uniqueness in everybody, and the contributions that everybody is capable of making. So part of, I think, the humanitarianism around Aquarius is this understanding that everybody is capable of making this extraordinary contribution, because we all have incredible value as individuals, to contribute to the world around us. And so the only way that we can really, as a society, benefit from the wisdom and the incredible gifts and the potential contributions of everybody is to come into a space where everybody is cared for and loved and protected, so that they can reach their highest potential, so that we as a society can reach our highest potential as well. So I think part of it is individualism. It's this understanding that we're all stronger when each one of us is put in a position where we're cared for and where we're okay and where we're protected. And I think that's part of it. And I think part of it is it's about inequity. It's about, the lack of fairness of some people having more than other people, or the lack of fairness of some people not being safe and some people being safe. So I think it's all of those kinds of things. But I think it's really interesting to look at how closely Aquarius is related to humanitarianism, and to look at why. And what I've come up with is that, it's that story in the beginning where, Aquarius is represented by this young boy who's brutalized by someone in a position of power, and who stands up and rebels against that. And I think this Aquarius energy of humanitarianism is that Aquarius realizes what it's like to be suppressed and subjugated and hurt, and will do anything in its power to make sure that other people don't have to experience that same suffering. And part of that is altruism, but part of that is just this incredible wisdom and knowledge that when we help each other, we're all stronger and we're all better. And when we help each other, we're able to gain and grow and learn from every single person's contributions. So, post below. Tell me what you think about Aquarius and humanitarianism. Autonomy and independence. So, we talked about this probably a lot through the course of this video. So, Aquarius has this desire for freedom, for this desire for personal autonomy, this desire to be independent, to not be sort of strapped down or told what to do, to march to the beat of their own drum, to do their own thing, to contribute in their own way, all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely that kind of energy of autonomy and freedom when it comes to Aquarius. And so these pictures sort of all demonstrate that. So the scissors cutting away the strings that are making someone else's puppet, the sort of I am free energy, the fish who doesn't want to be with all the other fish, so jumps into its own bowl to do its own thing, which I think is a really nice image for Aquarius. And this really beautiful quote that says, my alone feels so good, I'll only have you if you're sweeter than my solitude. And I think that that's part of this energy, is like, part of the journey of Aquarius is making peace with the self. It's making peace with what life feels like independently. It's making peace with spending time alone, and it's making peace with solitude, and it's coming into a space where you trust yourself to show up for yourself, where you trust that you're capable of doing what you need to do, and that you don't need to have a ton of attachments in order to make it through life. And I think, part of Aquarius energy is this lack of willingness to fill yourself with people or circumstances that don't serve you, just so that you don't have to be alone. And I think that that's the most positive expression of Aquarius energy, is this knowledge and wisdom that you have all these beautiful things inside of yourself, and that other people are really important, and relationships and commitments are really important, but that you should really only have them when they're serving you and they're serving the other person. You shouldn't have them just to fill the void that's left by a feeling of aloneness. And so now we move to the where's the ouch section. So the where's the ouch section is sort of looking at like what Aquarius energy looks like when you're hurt, or when you're feeling vulnerable, or when you're sad or angry, or when something really awful happens and you just don't know how to deal with that. That's when the where's the ouch things happen. So you want to look at how this energy shows up in your life, and just look at when you start sort of seeing these behaviors in yourself. Have other people talked about maybe these are things that they see in you, and just look at and see if you can convert these types of behaviors to the ones that I talked about earlier. See if you can run the energy in just a cleaner way, while at the same time recognizing that everybody runs energy in light and shadow, and that's not about self-judgment. It's not about fixing yourself or changing yourself. It's about coming into a space where you are happy with your actions, and you're happy with your reactions, and you're happy with how you're showing up in your life with other people. So the first one is, where's the ouch, don't tell me what to do. And this is a classic Aquarius energy, right? So it's, Aquarius isn't here to fit in. Aquarius is here to stand out. And Aquarius isn't really here to follow the rules. It's here to question them and challenge them, and bring us all into a space where we start asking why they exist in the first place. So, if that's your purpose, then of course one of the slipperiest slopes is to come into a space where you can't accept anybody else's authority, no matter what the circumstance, right? So I like the little picture that says, you're not the boss of me. I think there's two really cute kids that are both kind of giving you the stink eye because you told them what to do, even when telling them what to do is not to eat so many cookies they're going to throw up. This you'll see a lot in Aquarius kids. It's this willingness to do something that doesn't feel good, or that they don't even enjoy, because they'd rather do something that feels horrible than listen to their parents who are telling them what to do when they don't want to be told what to do, right? So this is sort of classic Aquarius energy, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just you have to come into a space where you realize that if you choose to live in society, then at some point you have to accept someone else's authority. It's about coming into a space when you learn to tolerate it, and where you learn to choose your battles and pick your battles, right? Because, anybody who's ever had a job, at some point you have to listen to your boss, or, anybody who, lives in a society has to follow the rules, or they can end up in jail, right? So it's coming into a space where you make peace with the fact that, some of the constrictions that you experience in life, and sometimes when people tell you what to do, it's for your benefit or for society's benefit, and just coming into a space where you make peace with the fact that sometimes you're not in control, and sometimes you do have to listen to other people. And I don't think that's easy. I think it's about choosing your battles. And I think Aquarius energy is as such that I really think that you should pick a cause. You should pick something that you care about, and that you can fight for, and that you can shift and grow and change, because it directs the energy outward, instead of having it sort of show up in every different area of your life, right? So, pick something to focus that Aquarius energy on, so that you're not fighting against everyone who tells you, that you have to get to the back of the line, or that you have to, finish your report by Monday, right? So it's coming into a space where you accept that sometimes in life people are going to tell you what to do, and figure out when to listen and when not to listen, but use your mind to determine what the best decision is for you and for everybody else. When there's a ouch, running away and commitment phobia, this is true for everyone. It's particularly true for Aquarius moons. If you feel comfortable with yourself, and if you like your own company, if you like your independence, and if you like your freedom, and you like autonomy, and someone else is disrupting your world and arguing with you and making your life difficult, then, or treating you in a way that you don't think is appropriate, or that you don't think is honoring, then a lot of times the first response of someone with strong Aquarius energy is to walk away. So even if a relationship is like a love match, even if that person is your soulmate, even if all sorts of wonderful things and potentials are possible if you stick around, Aquarius will sometimes walk away just because they don't have any fear of being alone. Not everyone, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. There are definitely Aquariuses that are afraid of being alone, but Aquarius energy naturally often chooses the idea of freedom, autonomy, and solitude over any conflict. And so running away from arguments, running away from people that are creating conflict in your life or difficulty in your life is very, very common in Aquarius. And breaking up relationships that are perfectly healthy relationships because there's a single conflict is very Aquarius, or feeling a sense of panic when commitment starts to happen. So feeling a sense of panic when you set the wedding date, feeling a sense of panic when you have to give up your apartment. All those kinds of things come into play with Aquarius energy, because Aquarius on some level, seeks independence and autonomy and freedom. And so, if part of who you are, if part of who your soul is this person who wants to march to the beat of your own drum, then when you go from becoming, I to us, can be threatening and challenging and difficult, and you can feel like you're losing a part of yourself in that shift or that change. And so sometimes that involves running away from difficult things, running away from conflicts, running away from conflicts at work, running away from being told to do at work, being told what to do at work, running away from relationships, running away from relationships when they start to talk about commitment, or they talk about getting serious. So when there's an ouch, sometimes Aquarius energy can throw away something that's perfectly good because there's a tiny little blemish on it. And so that's something that I think you should look at when you're an Aquarius, like use that powerful, brilliant mind of yours and ask yourself some questions about what you're willing to give up in order to not have to experience a little bit of discomfort. When there's an ouch, living in the future. So we talked about this. Aquarius rules the 11th house. Aquarius has a relationship with future technology, with the energy of the future, with the future in general. And so what I wanted to sort of look at is like a lot of times when Aquarius is running in shadow, or when Aquarius is running from a place of woundedness or hurt, it stops being willing to face life and comes into a space where it lives in the fantasy of what could be or what will be, and leaves what they're experiencing right now. And if you never show up in your present life, then you never learn from it, you never grow from it, you never shift, and you never really get to live, because you spend all your time and your mind and your ideas and your fantasies of what could be. You forget to appreciate the beauty in what is in this very moment. And so that's what this says, is if you're always racing to the next moment, what happens to this one, right? And so this energy of Aquarius is this unwillingness to reach into the past and figure out what you can learn from what you've experienced in your life, or to sit still and be present in your present, and come into a space where you can shift and grow and learn from what you're experiencing right now. And it's this living in fantasy, living in what could be. And then when that beautiful, fantastic fantasy finally shows up in your life, you escape from that by creating a new fantasy. So it's a lack of groundedness, and it's a lack of willingness to live in the present world in this moment and absorb the beauty that lies therein. Where there's an ouch, aloof and distant. So this sort of fits into what we were talking about earlier. If you have this sort of energy of like independence, and you like a lot of freedom and you like a lot of autonomy, then it can feel threatening when someone comes into your life and tries to take all your time, or someone comes into your life and you feel like that person is trying to change you. Or even sometimes with Aquarius, I think it's you feel like that person is trying to become you, trying to find things in common with you, and through finding those things in common with you, you feel like your identity and your individuality become compromised by that likeness or that similarity, right? So it's this sort of energy that, like, if a huge part of your self-definition is in your independence and your differentness and your uniqueness and your specialness, and then someone comes into your life and tries to wash that all away in order to create a connection with you, then you can want to distance from them, right? And so when there's an ouch, I think Aquarius make people chase their love. I think sometimes you can come into a space where you make people chase your attention and your love because you're so happy and you're so confident in just being yourself and being autonomous and independent and alone, that you forget that, other people want to connect with you. They want to feel like there's something similar between you. They want to feel like they're part of your tribe. They want to feel like they're a part of you. And so it's a sort of energy of resisting someone else's desire to connect with you, resisting someone else's need to feel close to you, because you're holding on to that need that you have for freedom and autonomy and independence, right? So, one quality that comes up a lot in Aquarius is this energy of sort of aloofness or distancing between yourself and other people, and sort of coming into a space where you put a wall up between your heart and the rest of the world. And I said connection and compromise because, basically if, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Is that like, if you're perfectly happy being yourself and being by yourself and you don't need to fit in order to be okay, which is pretty healthy expression of Aquarius energy, then you might come to a place where you're unwilling to compromise in order to connect with other people. You're unwilling to, do things you don't want to do, or try things you don't want to try in order to connect with other people. Because if you feel good by yourself and you feel good, just in isolation or alone or as you are, then why do you need to compromise who you are in order to find connection with someone else? And I don't think any of those are bad things. I just think that it's important to remember that connecting to other people, emotional connections and vulnerable connections and deep connections with other people are really important. They're one of the really big ways that we learn and grow in life, and they're that's part of it, but part of it is just they're part of the beauty of life. They're part of the beauty of humanity, or they're sort of like heartfelt connections when someone makes you feel something really deep and meaningful, and sometimes those feelings are scary, and sometimes we resist them and sometimes we run away from them, but that doesn't mean that they don't have beautiful things to offer. Like, I think we get to a point sometimes where we're afraid of feeling, and if we're afraid of feeling, then we don't let ourselves feel fully loved. We don't let ourselves feel joyfully or feel hopefully or feel peacefully, because we steal ourselves away from those things because it feels safer to stay sort of level and logical and in the mind than it does to draw ourselves into the heart. And so part of the energy of healing Aquarius is coming into a space where you figure out how to be independent and be individual and be autonomous and have freedom, but also make a life with someone else, and learn how to build something with someone else, and learn how to make their opinion count as much as yours does. I think that's a really important one too, is like, to extend that idea of hierarchy into your personal relationships, to extend the idea of releasing hierarchy into your personal relationships so that both people are equals and both people have an equal voice, and so that you don't disappear into your mind when you're having a discussion that should be involving your heart. Where there's an ouch, loneliness, exile, and isolation. So I talked about this earlier. Aquarius, I feel like, can be, when it's hurt, Aquarius energy is polarized. It's either the energy I talked about earlier, which is like, I'm just going to walk away because I don't need you anyway, or it's this energy of like, nobody loves me, I can't find my tribe, I'm alone, I'm different, I feel like there's no one like me, and there's this feeling of isolationness and hurt that comes with that expression of the energy. So when there's an ouch, there can be this sort of energy of like just never feeling like you're finding your tribe, never feeling like you're finding people like you, feeling like an outsider and an exile, and like feeling like you can't find the connections that you'd so strongly desire in life, right? And so this sort of energy is part of the word, the ouch, right? And unfortunately, I think that the gateway through this kind of energy is making peace with who you are and coming into a space where you accept yourself fully, so that when you do surround yourself with people who aren't like you, you don't try and become like them, or you don't try and convince them that you're good enough, but you're coming from a position of power and a position of strength where you're forging relationships with other people based on total self-love and self-acceptance. It's like Lady Gaga-esque, you're wearing like your Kermit suit and you don't really care that you're like, surrounded by a whole bunch of people who are wearing like, black suits that all look the same. You're just kind of cool with being unique and different and special. And when you start coming to a space when you're cool with being unique and different and special, then the world starts accepting you for your uniqueness and your difference and your specialness. And to possibilities. So this is sort of the end. And I think, throughout I've talked about all the different expressions of Aquarius energy and what they can look like when they're really happy and shiny and fantastic. But I want to end with just like the possibilities, like we talked about earlier. Aquarius is this energy, and I love this picture, which is like this woman carrying lightning, and I feel like that's this really beautiful image for Aquarius, the lightning bolt. When lightning comes through the sky, it comes through this incredible storm, and then when it hits the sand, if you dig underneath the sand, the place that it hits actually turns the sand to glass, right? So Aquarius has this energy of like transformation, this everything Aquarius touches changes and shifts and grows. And I think Aquarius has this incredible energy of drawing all of us into the future, making us all question where we are and what we want and who we are, and just bringing us all into this amazing space of change and growth. And I think Aquarius makes the world a better place because, it challenges the status quo. It helps people. It goes into, this sort of humanitarian mode where it's making the world a better place. And I think it's this really dynamic, interesting, engaged energy that changes things. And we need someone to come in and shake things up. We need someone to teach us how to love ourselves as we are, and that we don't need to change in order to be loved, and that we don't need to become something else in order to be loved. We can just be ourselves and be loved. And I think Aquarius has this energy that we all can learn from, this energy of learning, complete and total self-acceptance. And, all of us are quirky and unique and different. And there's beauty in that. I think there's a Justin Timberlake, I think, said, something along the lines of, the things that you get teased for growing up are the things that, buy your house when you're an adult, right? It's like, all of those things that made you quirky and unique when you're a teenager or when you're a kid, those are the things that make you different and valuable and powerful as an adult. The kid that spends all of his time playing on computers when he's 8 years old grows up and, everyone teases him for being a nerd, and then he grows up and becomes a programmer and starts a company and gives, thousands of people's jobs, right? So, the point is to mine our differences and appreciate our differences and love each other for our differences. And I think that's the energy of Aquarius, is challenging the status quo, opening ourselves up to the value that everyone brings to the world, and opening ourselves up to the idea that the reason that everybody brings value to the world is not because of our similarities, but because of our differences, and being willing to change and grow and shift. I think all of those things are all of the beautiful things that Aquarius brings to the world. And so radical self-love and acceptance is the key lesson for Aquarius. And it's the gateway to all of the power and the wisdom that Aquarius brings into the world, is faith in the self and self-acceptance and self-love, and just coming from a place where you don't need to be anyone else because you're perfect just as you are, right? Thank you for listening. This was Bonnie with Heal with Astrology.